On the left. Okay, great. Thank you. We have a meeting today with John Riley, who is the historian here at Mount Vernon. And this beautiful building, all of the administrative offices and a lobby and the libraries downstairs. And looking for John here. Last door on the left. This must be it. There he is. John.
Brady, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Folks, I want you to meet John Riley. You're the historian here at Mount Vernon.
Right.
And currently you're working on a very interesting project, and that is this round barn.
Right. Washington, essentially this is a symbol of Washington's innovation when it comes to agriculture. Most people that come still to Mount Vernon have really no idea that Washington made a living as a farmer. However, this barn happens to be totally his invention, as best we can tell.
You've mocked up this scale.
What this shows exactly. Well, okay. we see a framing of the upper floor of the two floors, so we don't see the masonry first floor here. Okay. But it gives you an idea of sort of a skeleton of how this barn works. It had to be round or roundish, 16-sided, provided a good enough circle for Washington's purposes. Essentially, the idea was to Washington's goal was to move ahead with wheat processing, in fact, move forward beyond what anyone was doing at the time. Okay. In his day, to thresh wheat, you could do it in two different manners. One was to use a wooden flail, which is essentially a wooden stick, and beat that wheat
trying to beat the grain out of the out of the plant.
The idea is to separate the kernel off of the straw. Okay. Okay. Now what happens there, of course, you need great amounts of labor to do that by hand, and you generally do that inside on a wooden floor inside a barn.
Called a threshing barn. A threshing barn.
Okay. This was different. Washington had threshing barns. The other way to thresh wheat was to use animals, and in some countries it's even done today. You essentially use the weight of the animal's hooves to walk in a circle around on top of the wheat, and the force of their hooves separates that and does the same thing as the force of your flail. Okay. But then you're not using slave labor, you're using animal power. Right. The problem with that in Washington's day is most of the time that was done outside in a barnyard. And you can imagine what your wheat being ground into dirt would do to your wheat, and the filthy mess you'd have to clean that wheat.
So they come up with a barn to do that process.
Exactly. Let's move the whole process indoors. We don't know of anybody who had thought of that notion, although maybe it's not stunning to us today. Nobody had bothered, and I think that's the interesting thing about Washington. He was willing to experiment, and frankly willing to perhaps fail or perhaps succeed, but not knowing unless he tried.
Right. So this was then referred to as a treading?
A treading barn. Exactly.
Okay. And actually, well, I was going to say, this model is actually missing the bottom floor, the brick floor.
That's right.
That you found in the original.
Exactly.
And you have a photograph of this. I was going to bring this up here.
We are very fortunate, absolutely, to have someone photograph the barn in the 1870s before it was razed to the ground.
Okay,
so that helped us.
They knocked this down.
That was knocked down in the 1870s, but it stood for 75 years. Now, at this point, it is no longer used in Washington's original fashion. Somebody has broken through, for instance, one of the windows to give another barn. It's probably a hay barn by this time.
Right. But here is that brick bottom portion that isn't seen, and the grain was actually put up here, and the animals would walk around.
That's right.
And then as that grain separated, there were gaps in the floorboard.
That's right. Inch-and-a-half gaps in the floorboard. So
and it would let the grain drop through to the bottom.
That's right. So we've got a nice 4-acre tract in which this barn is going to be the centerpiece of a whole farming exhibit. We have wheat growing, tobacco growing, not in December, but we do this to give people an idea of what Washington did on the plantation in a much larger context of an 8,000-acre farm.
Okay, well, let's get your coat and go out and take a look at it.
Okay. So your animals are moving up here, as will visitors next year. Will be herded up here.
So when they come to Mount Vernon, the visitors are able to come out here.
That's right. They'll come right up here, and they'll go into the center of the barn. The animals are brought up here. In a sense, they are treaded out. They're treading out in a circle on the exterior of the circumference here of the circle. This inside is where the wheat was stored until it was ready to be laid out here on the floor. Obviously, we're not seeing the real floor here yet. Right. These 8 posts, you'll see 8 posts coming up from the inner that actually supports the roof system.
Do you hope to, as far as when the animals get in here, they're just going to be free? They're not tethered in
They're not tethered, no. And right now we've actually built a training ring which is 52 feet in diameter, just like the barn on another farm of ours. So we're training these animals already to be able to, at command, to work, and it's working so far. Really? The question, of course, is going to be once you put a horse into an enclosed structure with gaps in the floor and light coming up underneath their feet, how they're going to react, and I don't think we're going to know that until we've got the barn built. So we've got
unfortunately, there's really no existing records of what Washington's horses
we don't. It's funny. We know how the barn was built and when it was built and all the designs and the members that went in there. But when it's finally built, Washington's writing. He's in Philadelphia as president, so this is all going on when most of it when he's not at home, and his carpenter overseer and his manager. Whether the letters are lost or not, Washington is asking the question in his letters home, how's it working? You know, I'm thinking about building another one of these. I need to know how it's working. And we don't have the response. So we're going to have to work out some of these problems on our own, not having, all the answers.
Right. Well, I hope it works well for you, and people are certainly invited to come out and see this when it opens next
September
year.
of 1996. It'll be formally dedicated, and then the visitors will actually come into this barn, and if we're lucky and the horses behave, they may be able to even stand in the center while the horses move around them.
Well, that'd be neat. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Good. You're welcome.
And I want to thank you for joining me. This has been Brady Kress here at Mount Vernon, Virginia with Exploring Historic America.